Okay, great. Thank you, Avik Roy, for meeting with me today. We are here at the Defending the American Dream Summit, and you just gave a speech on Obamacare 2.0.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, obviously you've done massive amounts of research. A lot of what you said has come true. You know, what you said would happen, you know, the truth about what Obamacare was about. Where do you see it going from here? Knowing what we all know now, knowing what's been happening with it, where do you see Obamacare in general going from here?
Yeah, great question. So I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a stall in the number of people who sign up for Obamacare. So in year one, year two, they kind of got the low-hanging fruit where all the people who are effectively getting quote-unquote free health care, obviously we're all paying for it, but quote-unquote free health care, those people have signed up. Now the real problem is that what Obamacare has done, and this is something that you were alluding to earlier, is it's driven up the cost of health insurance for people who want to buy it on their own. And so as a result of that, let's say you're now having to pay $100 a month more for your health insurance premiums. Even if Obamacare is giving you a $50 subsidy, that doesn't help you because the cost of your health insurance has gone up by $100.
Right.
So those people aren't signing up by and large today. And I think that's going to be a tough sell for Obamacare. They're going to work hard to try to get those people enrolled, but a lot of them are not going to because they can't afford it.
And so if the people don't enroll, that kind of defeats the purpose of the sort of pyramid scheme going on, right?
Yeah, so that's going to be the challenge, is that I think with the exchange, which is sort of the quasi-private element of Obamacare, enrollment is going to slow down. The Medicaid expansion, obviously New Hampshire has expanded Medicaid, unfortunately, but the states that have expanded Medicaid, that's been the biggest driver of the growth of people with quote-unquote health insurance is
right.
Medicaid, but Medicaid isn't real insurance, as I talked about in that session, because you get Medicaid and you don't actually have access to physicians, you don't actually have access to the care you need.
Right. And, you know, one of the things over and over again we fought about with Obamacare's Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire is how are we going to pay for it when the federal funds start drying up, which is coming up.
Absolutely.
And it's only 10% at first, but it's going to be more and more and more, and we already know the government, you know, makes the rules. No one has said ever, not any Republicans who voted it in, not any Democrats, no one has ever said how we're going to pay for it. What do you see happening in states that have put that into place and never came up with an idea of how to pay for it?
Well, listen, I mean, I know that in New Hampshire, everyone always says, well, if we do this and it messes up, there's going to be an income tax. If there's one thing that's going to drive an income tax in New Hampshire, it's going to be this, because Medicaid is so big. It's already, as again I mentioned in the session, for most states, it's 50% of the budget. If it becomes 60% of the budget, there's just no other way to pay for it other than income taxes. And there's only so much you can raise sales tax where people just start shopping in Vermont and Massachusetts, right? So
we don't even have sales tax,
so
yeah.
Right now you're benefiting from that.
Right.
So you could have a sales tax as well. So in every state it's different, right? Because some states don't have income taxes, they have sales tax. You don't have income taxes and sales tax, you have property taxes. So different states have different things that they do and don't do.
Right.
And what they'll be forced to do is fill in the blanks. So like a state like New Hampshire, a state like Texas where I now live, they may have to do more of that, more sales taxes, more property taxes, more income taxes, because, New Hampshire can't borrow money from China. So that money has to come from somewhere. And again, it's a large amount of money. So it's not like it's a couple $1 million here and there. It is going to be a huge sum that the state is going to be forced to pay. And the politicians are not going to want to cut spending. They're going to want to raise taxes. And so that's the big problem, and that's what your legislators are going to have to figure out how to deal with.
Well, partly dealing with it now because there was a sunset provision put in, but they're fighting about it now. But even though they're fighting about it, the people who want to keep Obamacare's Medicaid expansion still haven't come up with a way to pay for it. And they won't answer the question, ever. They've been asked, they won't answer it.
Yeah, and the problem now is that the hospital lobby and the medical industry lobby is going to lobby to say, hey, and with all the taxpayer funds that they're now collecting, thanks to Obamacare and the Medicaid expansion, they can now take that money and use it to lobby your legislators to say, hey, keep the Medicaid expansion going. And so that's the vicious cycle that has been now triggered because you expanded Medicaid in your state.
And meanwhile, taxpayers and the people who have to suffer under Medicaid aren't really getting any help from it.
Not enough, yeah. I mean, that's the problem. So, we spend $450 billion a year on Medicaid across the country. And all the studies show that people on Medicaid do no better than people who have no insurance at all. And that is an appalling result when you spend $450 billion a year. Our entire defense budget, our entire military is something like $800 billion a year. So for like 50 or 60% of the defense budget for the military superpower of the world, we can't make people's healthcare outcomes better. How is that possible?
Right.
And that shows you how dysfunctional the program is.
Especially with everything we know. The other thing, too, is I know that when the funds start drying up, Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, those people they're still going to get more funding than Medicaid people, because that's only 50%. So the people who are on Medicaid who truly need it are going to be pushed to the back of the bus.
Yeah.
That'll happen? That should happen when the funds start drying up a little bit, right? When states are going to have to make that choice in the budget.
Yeah, that's all. If you look at some of the states, you can see, for example, if you want to look at a case study of how this plays out, there's two really good ones. Actually, there's three. One that's right by New Hampshire is Maine. So Maine, a few years back, before Obamacare, did a big expansion of Medicaid, and the state basically went broke because all these people signed up more than they expected.
Of course.
And they didn't have the money to pay for it. Again, Maine can't borrow money from, Quebec or from China. So what are they going to do? They had to turn people away, and particularly turn down how much they were paying doctors and hospitals to care for these people, say that certain procedures and services weren't covered, and it became this trap, right? And I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that happen in a state that runs out of money, which again, all these states will, because it's crowding out education, it's crowding out highways, it's crowding out all things that states actually are supposed to spend money on.
Okay, last question. This is a big one.
Okay.
What do you think would happen if we could repeal Obamacare tomorrow?
Wow. Well, it would depend on what we replaced it with, right? If we repealed Obamacare tomorrow and didn't replace it with anything, then a lot of people would lose their health insurance. We would have a lot lower taxes, and our economy would grow faster. That's all true. But what I've argued is that we should actually, as conservatives, embrace the goal of ensuring that every American has access to good health care and health coverage, because that goal can be achieved by having a dramatically smaller government than the one we have, and dramatically less spending on health care by the government than we currently have. The reason our health care in America is so expensive and so unaffordable today is because the government has messed it up and made it so expensive. And with smart reforms that change the system gradually but in the right direction, you can make health insurance more affordable for every American, help the people who truly need the help, the sick, the vulnerable, the deeply impoverished, and let everyone else participate in the free market for health care. And that would make the system so much better and so much higher quality and so much more patient-oriented than the system we have today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.